Good afternoon. Welcome, bienvenidos a Taller Puertorriqueño. Thank you so much for being here with us on this beautiful October day. My name is Erica Goslin. I'm the Deputy Director and Interim Executive Director at Taller Puertorriqueño. One of the things I love about Taller's 50-year history is that we began as a group of neighborhood artists, printmakers, students, and rebels. I celebrate that rebellious spirit, and I see it alive in the many things that we do here. Taller continues to serve our community through our archives, where we house a collection of books, videos, audio tapes, and a very special oral history project of the neighborhood that was done by kids and students in the 70s, Batiendo la Olla, which is now being updated and released for our 50th anniversary. We continue to serve families through our arts education after-school programs, teaching things like Latino STEM, Bomba y Plena, visual arts, and more. We also have our exhibitions program showing Latino artists in our gallery right here in El Barrio. It's free and it's open to the public. And of course, we have our incredible bilingual bookstore, the only one in the region, with all proceeds supporting our nonprofit. So whether you're here today for the first time or a returning member, please find out how you can get involved. Become a member, volunteer with us. Please talk with our staff and board members to find out what you can do to join our community. I invite you to come to our 50th anniversary gala on November 1st. Tickets close this Friday. I want to say that Taller Puertorriqueño has been active in several civic engagement activities to mobilize Latinos to use our voices and vote. We're thrilled to be just down the street from the newly opened commissioner's office that you'll hear more about today. We've had volunteers from the Committee of 70 teach our students about the importance of civic engagement, and we continue to participate in nonpartisan activities highlighting Latino visibility and the importance of participation in our democracy. Thank you to the Hispanic Federation and Latino Victory, and to Nilda Ruiz of APM for bringing us together for this important event. I want to acknowledge our council member who's here, Ketsi Lozada. And I also want to recognize our board members here in attendance. We have our board vice chair, Joanna Diaz. Our board treasurer, Miguel Concepcion. We have a board member, Carlos Clausel. I think former board chair, Edgardo Gonzalez. Are you here, Edgardo? And we have our former executive director of Taller, Carmen Febo San Miguel. Thank you all for being here. I'd like to turn it over to Frankie Miranda, President and CEO of the Hispanic Federation.
Thank you, Erica. Gracias for the warm welcome, and to all the team here at Taller Puertorriqueño for hosting us. Good morning, buenos días. I am honored to be here to share important results from our latest survey on the Latino electorate, in which I should add is the most comprehensive poll done this election cycle on Latino voters in key battleground states. Our pollster, Matt Barreto, will expand on the uniqueness of our poll a little later during the presentation, but it's no coincidence that we are here today to release this poll in the most consequential of swing states, Pennsylvania, or what we choose, or why we choose the city of brotherly love with its large and ever-growing Latino population, a population, by the way, that has nearly doubled in size over the past 2 decades. And it should be no surprise to anyone that we are here today at this cultural jewel, an essential Puerto Rican institution, Taller Puertorriqueño. Given the significance of the Puerto Rican vote in this election, which represents 350,000 of the 580,000 eligible Latino voters in this state. We lovingly call Puerto Rico La Isla del Encanto. Well, today, Pennsylvania, and especially during this election, es el estado del encanto, because As Boricuas go, so may go the state and the entire nation. Pennsylvania is indeed a critical part of our story, our growing and hardworking Latino community, 64 million strong. And whether we're in Phoenix, Arizona, or Clark County, Nevada, Philadelphia, Allentown, Pennsylvania, we are undoubtedly helping to shape America's culture, economy, and democracy. All the data, numbers, and insights that we have tells us this. Our community is energized and ready to play a decisive role in the upcoming presidential elections. In 2020, there were 30 million Latinos eligible to vote, and over 16 million voters participated in that presidential election. What's more impressive is that today we have 36 million Latino eligible voters, and we're getting ready for a record number of Latinos participating in the upcoming general election. Our polls continues to show that more than 70% of Latino voters are certain that they will vote in the upcoming elections. This expected turnout will undoubtedly impact the 2024 election, may very well be the decisive in who will win the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. These findings of our poll of Latino voters in key states, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, and of course, Pennsylvania, provides a deep dive on the Latino voter sentiment at a crucial time just 3 weeks before the election. Thanks to the collaboration we have with our sister organization, Latino Victory Foundation, we're able to provide you with the most comprehensive and probably the last reliable snapshot of Latino voters before the most important election of our generation. We're here to reclaim our own narrative. Most polls have been grabbing the headlines, try to tell a story about the Latino vote, often with insufficient data. The sample is either not inclusive or sufficient size or lack cultural nuances. How to ask the right questions needs a cultural competency and linguistically competency that is reflected here in this room. It is our hope that with this poll, we reframe the way that Latino voter power is perceived, both nationally and at the state level. But most importantly, that we tell our own story, that we help our own community to get to the polls. You should know that we need to highlight that Latino voters have consistently supported taking action on climate change, reproductive rights, defending LGBTQ+ rights, and other fundamental freedoms. We are by and large supportive of progressive policies. Understanding that these issues and how to address them with our voters is key to mobilizing our community and curb misinformation that is rampant, especially targeting Spanish language speakers. We will appeal to our communities with more effective message and solutions rather than demonizing our communities. Today's discussion will be framed in a nonpartisan way, consistent with our 34-year of history, mobilizing Latinos to turn out to vote and elevating their needs and aspiration. Beyond the polls and survey, Hispanic Federation works with a network of more than 750 nonprofit community-based organizations in 40 states, DC, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands to help the youth to get access to affordable health care, obtain jobs, career skills, and get immigration support they need to fulfill the American dream. We are also working with our partners to make sure that our people, are registered to vote and can turn out on election day. We want political stakeholders, we want power brokers here in Pennsylvania and beyond to know that groups that are here in this room, many of these groups that are doing incredible work in the community are partnering to make sure that Latinos are there on election day. Here in Pennsylvania, Hispanic Federation is supporting 9 Latino-led organizations and get out the vote efforts. These organizations are here to mobilize our community to do door knockings, making phone calls, text messaging, and providing culturally and linguistically relevant voter information. And that's why we're here today, to continue highlighting the power and importance of the Latino vote. The results of the poll that we're about to present confirm that Latinos are listening and they care about this upcoming election. And on a personal note, I am a jibarito de Toalta, born on the island, raised in Puerto Rico. My parents are in Puerto Rico. My sister, my brother, my nieces, my nephews are in Puerto Rico. I lost my grandmother after Hurricane Maria. I am, like many of you, investing in the continuing recovery process in Nuestra Isla del Encanto. We all know that what is at stake in this election is also the future of our loved ones and the ones that desperately need us to advocate for them. Let's do the right thing and get as many of us to the polls. Let's continue the progress that we have accomplished in recent years in Puerto Rico and here in the United States. Our future, your future, is the future of everybody in Puerto Rico and here in the United States is in your hands. Now, to discuss the details of the poll findings, I will turn over to our team of political titans. And we have here incredible partners. Our partner in conceiving and conducting this poll is our sister organization, Latino Victory Foundation. To help us discuss some of the results, I'm very pleased to introduce one of our community's greatest philanthropists, community builder, political activist, who is the chair of Latino Victory and the founder of the Hispanic Federation, Luis Miranda. Let's give him an applause. Right. Also, I would like to welcome the administrator of the poll. This is the go-to when it comes to Latino polls. Our great friend, Matt Barreto, who is president and founder of BSP Strategies and professor of political science and Chicana studies at UCLA. Thank you, Matt. And mi hermana, Cindy Benavides, president and CEO of Latino Victory, who will be leading the Q&A after the presentation of the poll findings. So take it away. Let's get started. Go, Matt.
Great, thanks. I'm going to stand up here. As Frankie said, I'm also a professor, so I like to stand up and point at the screen and hopefully be a little more engaging. Luis, who is also a longtime pollster, somewhat of a mentor of mine as well, is going to join me in, so please join in at any point and comment on these findings. I'm just going to hope to walk you through the results so we can go ahead and start clicking through. Next slide. As Frankie said, this is part 2. We were together month and a half ago, 2 months ago, at the Democratic National Convention, releasing, before the convention started, a snapshot of a national poll of Latinos. And now we're following up, as he said, with a very large sample, 1,900, 300 each in the larger states of Arizona, Pennsylvania, Florida, and 200 each in the other states. It gives us a viability to be able to report out those results in each of our states. We were in the field until October 10th. We came out. And Luis and I are both going to talk about this as well. The survey was done in multiple modes to reach Latinos in the most reliable way, English or Spanish at every level, at every point of contact. They could answer in English or Spanish. Live phone, person-to-person live phone calls, text invites to your phones, and as well as online panels, all matched to the voter file. So we're not taking a one approach. We're doing multiple approaches to make sure we're reaching Latinos, that we have the most accurate data. All right. Go ahead. So to start with, I want to talk about the enthusiasm that we're seeing right now. And Frankie said that it's over 70%. You can see overall 71% in all of our states. I also have a breakout here that I want to draw your attention to and follow closely. Battleground states. That excludes Florida, which in past cycles has been a battleground state. We know it is not a battleground state where the presidential candidates are focusing. And so we've retallied our votes here, our Latino opinion, for just Arizona through Wisconsin, which are the 7 battleground states. That appears where it says BG states. 71% say they are certain to vote. 71% say they're certain to vote. It is going to be a very high turnout among Latinos. Go ahead. What we have asked here is how closely you're following the news, and this has been a substantial increase since the convention. We asked the same question 2 months ago at the DNC convention before it started. We now have 74% overall of Latino voters who say that they're closely following the news. Well over a third now who are saying they're watching it every day, like many of us in the room following it every day, but another 40% or so who are following it a few times per week when there are major events. 74% overall who tell us that they are watching this. So it is not only that Latinos are telling us they're going to vote, they are reporting that they are closely engaging and watching the news and being a part of this election cycle. Since the change happened on the Democratic ticket, this has been a remarkable feature. We know that there was polling suggesting the Latino vote was less enthusiastic over the summer about the major candidates that were running. Since the change in the Democratic ticket, 60% of Latinos tell us that since Biden left and Kamala Harris came in, 60% say that they are more interested in the election today. And we're seeing that on the ground in the work that the community organizations are doing and the phone calls we're making. In particular, young people, 18 to 29s, 65% say that they're now more interested in the election since Kamala Harris became the nominee. Highest of anyone, young Latinas. Latinas age 18 to 29, 67%, as well as bilingual households. Many second generation and first generation that are sort of in between, 66%. We're seeing a record increase now since the Harris nomination of Latinos paying more attention to the election. We also have seen an increase, and we're now reporting, this is the highest that we have recorded at this cycle. As Frankie said, this is the most in-depth poll you're going to find. 64% of Latinos in battleground states tell us that they have now been contacted by a campaign. And the top is we're getting text messages. You all have probably gotten those. We're also receiving campaign mail being sent to our houses by either the candidates or civic organizations. Been contacted by a phone call. 1/5, 1 out of 5 Latino voters in battleground states. Email, someone knocked on my door, 15%. That's a very high number. That's 1 out of 6 who report a door knock to their household. And you can see how this is compared if you click again. About a month ago, Intravision has a national tracking poll of 500 that they released. So a smaller sample and it's national. But a month ago, on September 18th, 48% of Latinos said that they had been contacted by a campaign, 48. It's now 64. So a lot has happened in this last month from September 18th to October 16th. And the Hispanic Fed and Latino Victory poll is documenting this for the first time. 64%. It's a really, really big number. And we hope to see it grow. It shouldn't stop until it hits 100%. Voters are telling us that they're feeling this as well. We asked a question, do you think candidates are making an effort to reach out and ask for your vote? And Latino voters are feeling this, and you can see anywhere the highest is here in Pennsylvania. 80% agree. Candidates are making an effort to reach out and ask for my vote. This is also a substantial increase since the summer. Latinos are now reporting they're seeing the campaign come to them. We had not seen this before the Democratic convention. We had not seen this earlier in the summer. In the last 2 months, in particular the last month, we're seeing increases in this. Overall, 75% and 75% in battleground states, but the highest of anywhere was here in Pennsylvania. Now, I want to draw your attention to a lot of Pennsylvania data. As Frankie said, probably now the most important Latino state. Even though the Latino voter population is slightly larger in Arizona, it's more critical, and it's approaching the size here, as he gave you the numbers. It's approaching the size here, almost 600,000 eligible now. I think he said 585. And the highest rate here of agreeing that candidates are reaching out. So we know that that work is happening here in Pennsylvania. What are the most important issues? This won't surprise anyone. Costs, economy, housing affordability are driving this. These are all the issues that rate 30% or higher. 60% say costs, 38% jobs in the economy, and housing affordability. So there's no question that that's pocketbook issues. But if you look down the list, there are still other important issues in our community: abortion and reproductive rights, gun violence, issues at both the Mexico border and also citizenship issues, access to affordable care, and other issues are important issues in the Latino community that they expect candidates to hear about. Latinos are optimistic. I think this is something that people are missing, that on the last slide, 60% said cost and economy, these are my major concerns. 59% of Latinos are optimistic that things are getting better in our economy right now. And so we have historically been a future, forward-thinking, optimistic community and culture, and that continues to come in. Even as costs are high, we recognize wages are going up, inflation is stabilizing, and Latinos no longer believe that the worst is ahead, only 27%. So there's an opportunity here for Latinos to see us turning that corner, and you see it across the different battlegrounds. 59% in the battleground states ties with the national average. Policy issues. So before we get into the candidate, I know everyone wants to see the candidate numbers and the horse race numbers, but let's talk about, as Frankie said, this is a nonpartisan effort. We're really here to talk about the issues and the enthusiasm. We are going to talk about the candidate horse race numbers as well. What are the most important issues that Latinos will support? And we asked, would you be more likely or less likely to support this candidate? You see at the top of the list, cutting taxes for middle-class families and raising taxes on big corporations, okay? 84% more likely to support that candidate. It's our highest margin of anything, plus 67, more likely versus less likely. The second, and an issue that got a lot of attention earlier and hasn't gotten as much attention, end the war with Israel and Hamas, a permanent ceasefire. 82% more likely. This is an issue we know in particular younger Latinos want to hear more about. Increasing regulations to reduce pollution and the effects of climate. 82% more likely. Passing a law to guarantee access to abortion for women who need it. 78% more likely. These are very large numbers that we go down. Path to citizenship, 75. Sensible gun control to ban assault rifles, 75. Canceling student loans with incomes under 125, 73. And passing a law to guarantee equal rights to marry for gay and lesbian couples, 70%. All of these policy issues, greater than 70% support, all the way up to 84 among Latinos. There is no evidence, and I don't say this as a Democrat, I say this as an analyst. There is no evidence that Latinos are getting, quote, more conservative. That doesn't mean that the Democratic Party is necessarily hitting the numbers they did in 2012 with Obama. But there is no evidence on the policy issues that Latinos are getting more conservative. It just means we need to go fight for the Latino vote, take the message to the Latino vote. 70% or higher on these progressive policy issues is what Latinos in this survey told us they wanted to hear. In particular, we asked who they trust and what their position is on abortion rights. And we asked the question this way: no matter what my own personal beliefs are, I think it is wrong to make abortion illegal and take that choice away from other people who may need it. We got 74% overall, 75% in the battlegrounds. You see across all the states, even in Florida, which is considered a more conservative Latino state, 68% agree. No matter what my own personal beliefs are, it is wrong to take that choice away. And then we ask on a battery of issues, which I'm about to show you, who do you trust? Which candidate do you trust on this issue? And one of the strongest advantages, maybe the strongest or second strongest advantage that Kamala Harris has is on protecting and ensuring rights of access to abortion among Latinos, 63 to 23, a plus 40 margin. So here's the other issues. The strongest advantage is actually on protecting immigrant rights. We asked a battery of items. Who do you trust more to handle this issue? Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? Again, not giving endorsements, just asking Latino voters who they trust. The number one issue of trust for Harris is on protecting immigrant rights and a path to citizenship. Number two, abortion rights for women. Number three, LGBTQ rights, something that she has been identified with all the way through her time in California, continues to be in the Latino community, is recognizing that almost in the same rate. Here, 39%, 39 margin. Access to affordable health care, 60 to 28, that's plus 32. Combating climate change and pollution, 57%, that's a plus 32. And finally, holding corporations accountable for high costs, also plus 27. So on each of these issues, there is a margin, there's a trust advantage for Kamala Harris, but her strongest here are on protecting immigrants, ensuring abortion rights, and protecting, standing up for LGBTQ couples. All right, here I want to break down a lot of data for you to show you where we have some patterns in our community. So this is presidential favorability ratings. We're not quite to vote choice. That's coming next. I know you're waiting for that. The blue dots are what is your favorable rating of Kamala Harris. The red dots is what is your favorable rating of Donald Trump. And you see overall, Harris is 61 to 38 on favorability, okay, plus 23. But if you look, you're going to see some patterns. So if you click by gender, we do continue to observe gender gaps. This has been widely reported. It is in this data. Among women, plus 35, 66 to 31. And among Latino men, 56 to 46. This doesn't say who they're going to vote for. This is just how are we rating these candidates as favorable, unfavorable. Next, you see among age, a very clear pattern here where older Latinos over 50, the highest support numbers and the highest favorability ratings for Kamala Harris. Younger Latinos in the 18 to 29 category, 59-42. Trump does somewhat better there, just in terms of favorability. For people who have been in the community for a long time, know that there's something there that people are working on. The next that I want to show you is bioculturation. And this is an important point that also gets to, and I'm going to show you one more slide on this in a second. This is a very important point that gets to survey reliability. When we do our survey, we said we will make sure that it is bilingual, that it is available in English or Spanish, that we call people with live callers, that we text them, that we use online panels. And you can see there's dramatic difference in English-dominant households, bilingual households, and Spanish households. Harris has a +8 in English-only households, a +20 in bilingual, and a +32 in Spanish households. Most mainstream polls are not doing what Frankie and Cindy are doing here in this poll, which is including all Latinos and making sure that we have the right sample of Spanish-dominant households. Oftentimes, these households are excluded from polls, which is why sometimes when you read a national poll, it looks like 50 to 42 among the Latino vote. We're not denying that that's the favorable ratings among English-dominant Latinos. It is. But you cannot only interview those Latinos and think you have an accurate portrait of our community. I'll show you the same thing when it comes to vote choice. So here's the candidate vote. As of October 15th, 2024, I give you 2 lines, the total vote, and then also the battleground states. I would encourage you to look at the battleground states as really the lead sort of marker in what we're seeing, because the Florida data is in the total vote and has a more conservative Latino vote. We're going to show you that in the next slide. On the multi-candidate, go ahead and go back, stay here. 59-37 in the full sample, but in the battleground states, 62-34. That's +28. That's the highest that we have recorded in the polling that we have done. It was about +23, +24 pre-convention. So we do observe an increase here over the last month or month and a half for the Harris campaign. This is consistent with some other polls. CBS, YouGov had a poll, very small sample of Latinos. I think only about 220 Latinos in their sample, but they also had, I think Harris at around 63-36. This is the largest Latino sample you're going to see on this, and 62-34 is what we're reporting. I think that's the headline for the Latino vote in the battleground states. Now let me break that down for you again. The vote, let me break the vote down for you by language. Go ahead, next slide. And go ahead and click one more time. This is just a crosstab, straight out of our crosstab book that you can find on the Hispanic Fed website, on our website. And this is what the first vote would be, and then we pushed people who said Stein, West, other, undecided, and we said, well, who would you pick between the 2 candidates? If you just have, and you can just focus on the combined vote, if you just have English households in your sample, you'll think it's 51-42. If you expand and you have the bilingual households in, you'll think it's 57-40. We see some numbers like that sometimes. And that's usually a pollster would say, like, no, we had some Spanish people in our poll. We had that. You'll probably end up somewhere around there. And if you also include Spanish dominant households, you see how much of a difference there is. 2-1, 64-32 versus only a 9-point gap. All of these are parts of our community. We're not only interviewing these folks, we're interviewing all of them, merging them together at the correct proportion so that you're getting the correct read of the Latino vote. And I think it's a very, very important point. When you see these other data points, whether it's from the New York Times or anyone, you want to know, are they actually including Spanish-dominant Latinos in their poll, and at what proportion? And it has to be somewhere in the mid to high 30s, we know, in terms of the number of Spanish speakers in our community. Here it is by state. I think if you click again, we might see some. There's the battleground state, 62-34, and one more click should get us to Pennsylvania. The highest of any of our margins, 64-31, is +33. As I said, in the 60s in the other battleground states, and a dramatic difference from Florida. So you see Florida only 44-51, -8 for Harris, +8 for Trump on the rounding. And that's why the total Florida, which is not a battleground state, is making the total number at 59-37 look a little bit different. The battleground states where most of the polling is being conducted, most of the Latino polling is being conducted, we're reading at 62-34, really driven by this large and substantial vote in Pennsylvania, 64-31. The strongest performing of any of the Latino battleground states. And a dramatic difference from what's happening in Florida, where there has been less investment in campaign attention. The final thing I'll show you is the congressional ballot. Frankie talked about House and Senate races as well. If you go to the next slide. What we find here is 53-31, 56-28 in the battleground states, a +27 margin. But notice larger numbers of undecided. So as people focus on the presidential this year, we're seeing those undecided numbers go down, 8% on the first ask, down to 4% on the second ask. But on Congress, people are still There's still a lot of time. U.S. Senate and U.S. House, there's still a lot of time. This is 1 out of 6, 16%. 1 out of 6 Latinos has not made up their mind, and there's an opportunity to influence those folks. I think that's the last slide. You can click. Yes, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Luis for any additional comments.
Want to highlight a couple of things. I was here a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things I said is there are very few persuadables out there. And at the end, whomever wins is going to depend on who comes out to vote. And you could see that when we push people to pick a candidate from the two main candidates, the undecideds are 4%. So at the end of the day, who wins the Latino vote in Pennsylvania, it's intimately related. Do we continue to communicate, Democrats or Republicans? As we have seen, there is a third that have not heard from the parties yet. Do we continue to communicate, and who comes out to vote? And that's an important statistic, because the election is just 3 weeks away. So now both parties move into this last leg where it's just getting their people to vote. And the second thing that I want to emphasize is the issue of language. Last week, lots of friends of mine, Republicans or Democrats, saw a poll where the gap was closer between Democrats and Republicans. But when you look at the sample, and at the end of the day, I have learned, I looked at the results after I look at the sample, because the sample, it's telling me who did they talk to. In that poll, 20% of those Latinos who were interviewed were Spanish speakers. But the universe of Latino voters, it's more like 35% are Latino voters. So when you get that number right, you saw the difference between English-speaking Latinos and Spanish-speaking Latinos, and having everyone in the sample, it's key to get an accurate number of where our community is at. So wanted to highlight these two things. And the last thing I say, it's how divided people are. When you see who they think best represents their aspirations in a whole bunch of issues, ex-President Trump, it's in the 30s. And the vice president, it's in the 50s and 60s. And at the end, that's the vote preference that you get. So no doubt you saw the numbers in Pennsylvania and how getting, for both parties, getting out those 589,000 Latinos who are registered to vote in Pennsylvania, it's going to make the difference. I finish with an overall. In the past, we only mattered in New York, Florida, Texas, and California, because that's where you have large concentration of Latinos. The difference now is that elections are so close, and Latinos now have dispersed throughout the country, that the 4% of Latino voters in Georgia are key in a state that you could win by 1 or 2 percentage points. The 5% of Latino voters in North Carolina are key because they can decide those electoral votes as well. So the dispersion of Latinos throughout the country, it's no longer important. Nobody's paid attention to all Latino New Yorkers. No one is coming to New York to talk to us, to see what our aspirations are. They're coming to the 589,000 Latinos in Pennsylvania, not the 3 million Latinos in New York. Because that dispersion and the closeness of our election, it's having a real impact that we as a community can make in deciding who becomes the president. As I said in a column that Frankie and I just wrote, the road to the White House comes through Pennsylvania Latino barrios.
Muchísimas gracias, Luis and Matt. I'm going to hold my remarks after the Q&A so that we can dive into the questions. And just to give you a couple of top points, my name is Cindy Benavides. I serve as the president and CEO of Latino Victory Foundation. And when we talk about numbers in this election, although we're 64 million strong, we are 36.2 million eligible Latino voters, of which we expect that at least 17 million would turn out to vote. I want you to think about the opportunity gap that exists between the 36.2 and the 17 million and how much work we have in the last 3 weeks. All right, Luis and Matt, I'm gonna open up the floor. If you could state your name, maybe the media source or organization you're from, so that we can take those questions.
To the
Yeah, we saw you put the mics there.
Yes. So do you think what appears to be obviously strong support for Kamala Harris is a result of just a more aggressive outreach by her so far in the campaign? Is this reflective of that?
Thank you for the question. I think, first of all, Latinos have historically voted Democrat at about a 2-to-1 margin. That's usually our sort of starting point. Yes, there are undecided voters, but that has historically been the trend in the 21st century and even before, that there is a stronger support for the Democratic Party through immigration, working class issues, and other things. So I think that Kamala Harris starts with an advantage. However, in this campaign in particular, we have seen record investment by the Harris campaign in the Latino community, events, multiple events here in Pennsylvania, all around the Southwest as well, Arizona, Nevada, elsewhere, really courting the Latino vote and increasing staffing, advertising, et cetera. In contrast, Trump has given a lot of speeches, but they've actually cut the number of RNC-run Hispanic outreach offices and field staff. And so when you look at the numbers, it's much more than 2-to-1. It's probably close to 5-to-1 or 7-to-1 in terms of the spending and the investment that the Harris campaign is doing. As I said, about a month ago or 2 months ago, we didn't see as big of a gap. We are seeing that gap grow. We're seeing the advantage grow. And it would appear to reflect what we're seeing on the ground from the campaign.
Want to add that in our poll in August, 37%, around 37% of Latinos didn't know who Kamala Harris was. They knew she was the vice president, but wanted to know more about her positions. I think that what's happening, it's with the investment of resources and the heightened election, people are beginning to be and making a final decision as to who they're going to vote, to the degree, as I said earlier, that undecided are at 4%. I believe whomever gets their people to vote, it's going to win the state.
Great. I see a question in the back.
Annie McCormick from Channel 6. Just a question for the nonpartisan get out the vote events, meaning ones that didn't receive any money or funding from the campaigns. I'm wondering, what are you seeing different this election, this presidential election, than you did before? Is it more programs? Is it more grassroots organizations?
Yep. Well, I can jump in, Frankie, and please jump in. I will tell you that for us, it's really on the nonpartisan side, focusing on programmatic work. And one of those is tying the issue of climate change to mothers, to Latina mothers. So we have a program called Vote Like a Madre, which is really relevant in the sense that we talk in language, culturally sensitive in terms of targeting Latina mothers, whether it's in English, bilingually, or in Spanglish, as I like to say, or directly in Spanish. And so really doing a lot of that investment across a couple of states, in Arizona in particular, about $2 million investing digitally there. Frankie?
In addition to that, what we are doing is elevating the importance of the community-based organizations. These are the trusted messengers in our community, the ones that never closed their door during the pandemic, help people with food, rental assistance, all of the essential services, and they are the best position to talk to the members of our community about the issues that they care about, the importance of nonpartisan civic engagement, voter education. We know that in our community and communities of color, if the first approach is done in a nonpartisan way, there is better chances for that person to actually get to vote to the ballot. So that's why here in Pennsylvania, we're partnering with 9 organizations here present today: Taller Puertorriqueño, Asociación Puertorriqueños en Marcha, National Puerto Rican Agenda, Make the Road, Casa San Jose, Ceiba, CASA, Hispanic Center of Lehigh Valley, and ACCDC, to do that, to make sure that we are talking to our members of our community through these voices. That is what is most important for the Hispanic Federation in our 34 years history, and we're going to continue doing that with providing them with funding to continue doing that on our historic investment that we're doing with our partner organizations.
And just to tie it back to the poll, there was a slide that Matt presented specifically on the issues. Latinos deeply care about the issues. We want to know what's going to get done. And so I would specifically reference that slide in talking about the Latino community as voters and tying them to issues. Yes, a question in the back.
Matt or Luis, does Vice President Harris needs to win the state in 2-1, like usually the Democratic Party wins the Latino vote nationally, or she needs to get the vote out more, especially in city, to win this state?
Probably will disagree on this, so we'll both be
You want me to go first? Okay. Well, I'll be curious to see what Luis says now. The first point I think you bring up is what will the turnout rate be? And we have to remember, and Frankie, Luis, and Cindy have all mentioned this, the Latino vote is growing dramatically here in Pennsylvania, one of the fastest growing states. So the Latino vote is not static. The number of votes that we had last year is not the number of votes we're going to have in 24. There's going to be possibly 80,000 more Latino voters just this cycle than in 2020. So I don't look at a specific number point of saying it has to be 64, it has to be 66 in order for one candidate to win or lose, because there's so many more votes. They need to first grow the turnout. That's number one, and get more people registered and turned out to vote, because it is an electorate that is voting about 2-1 Democratic. And so the more people that you can get registered and turning out on Election Day, which is why I think you're going to see an incredible ground campaign focused on voter turnout here, from not just the campaigns, but from the civic groups, from the groups that are on the ground. The more votes you turn out, that does benefit the Democratic ticket, because Latinos have historically voted more Democratic. But we have to look at the overall total raw numbers and what does it contribute. Pennsylvania was less than 100,000 votes decided, 50,000 I think in 2020. And you've heard the number of Latino votes, the number of Puerto Rican votes. It's a majority Puerto Rican community here. I think right now, Harris is eclipsing that 2-1 margin, 64-31 in Pennsylvania. If those trends continue and turnout is good, I think it bodes very well for the Harris campaign. Obviously, the largest vote is here in Philadelphia, but also the Lehigh Valley, and all the way to some of the towns in Scranton, Hazleton, Allentown. Those have huge Latino populations as well.
I'll give you a slightly different perception. I believe that what is happening and parties are beginning to realize that we're not a monolithic group anymore. So it's not just getting Latinos out to vote. For those parties, it's to get the right Latinos out to vote. If you get more Latinos, men, to vote, you saw the gender gap. If we get more of our women out to vote, you saw the gender gap. So I think that what parties are beginning to understand, which they didn't 4 years ago, is that there are nuances in who we are as a community, and learning those nuances is key to win a state or not. Because at the end of the day, as I am tired of saying, there are no more persuadables in the world. Everyone has an opinion. I hear the news when they interview 4 undecided voters and 3 of them begin to speak nicely about Trump. Well, that's not an undecided vote. That person already has a predisposition of who they're going to vote. The same thing is happening in our community. And for parties to understand who to get out, it's going to be the difference, because nonprofits like the Latino Victory Foundation and the Hispanic Federation, they're just going to get Latinos out to vote. It's the party's responsibility to then make sure who turns the volume on.
Thank you, Luis and Matt. And I would just add that since 2016, when Trump and Clinton faced off, we have 38% new voters coming into 2024. I think I saw a question over here.
Yes. Did you? Okay. So just, Emily from WHYY, you stressed just getting out the vote is so important. To your knowledge or in your research, what are some of the barriers for Latino voters? I guess especially thinking about Spanish dominant Latino voters in coming out to the polls, voting by mail, and how are groups working to address those, especially in Pennsylvania?
Okay. And Frankie, feel free to come up here. Okay. All right. Come on, Luis.
That comes with being old. There's a lot of emphasis that I believe nonprofits have a big role to play on misinformation, on battleground states that now have 17 hurdles for people to go out and vote, for poll workers to go and count those votes at the end of election day. And I think the main hurdle that we are going to have, it's going to have all of these new rules that we don't even necessarily know are there. I was reading a report on Georgia and how to count the vote and how you can challenge people, and you have to have 3 different poll workers count a whole bunch of manual ballots. And if the 3 of them don't come with the same result, you have to start all over. Imagine at 11 o'clock p.m., after you have been at a poll all day long as a poll worker, that then 3 people need to take 1,000 ballots and come up with the same result. So I think that the main difficulty it's going to be all of the work that anti-democratic forces have put out there to suppress our vote, and nonprofits are like a beacon, just making sure people exercise their right and go out and vote.
Thank you. And to double click on that, the Federation has to work with our organizations in a different way this time around. This is the first time that our canvassers have been threatened with guns. This is the first time that our canvassers, people have been spitting on them. We have to change the color of the shirts of our campaign because people were seeing colors of the Hispanic Federation. They said, you are a front of this party or the other. We have sued twice the state of Florida for the new regulations about who can actually canvass or register people to vote. We won in Florida twice, but it is about working with these organizations to educate what is the landscape, what are the new rules, what are the new obstacles, because the reality is that there are people that are not interested in the democratic process investing a lot of time, energy, and resources to make it more difficult, less accessible, and to ensure that certain votes get in and others are challenged. I like to say that, we cannot be on the both ends of the problem. We cannot be the community that is having people stealing votes or voting illegally, or being the community that is not coming out in large numbers at the same time. It cannot be both, but that is why it is important to educate. And the group here can give you more information about all the issues, challenges, and opportunities that they have, especially here in Pennsylvania. But it's all about educating. And even when we do some of the traditional voter registration and voter education that we used to do on TV with some of the TV partners that are here, or the radio and everything, we have to make sure that we train the people on the phone to say, if you are getting a call from this state, you need to respond it in a different way than if you get a caller from this state. So it has become an increasingly complicated landscape. And even having to have security protocols for your canvassers. Before it was just you take that side of the parking lot, I'm gonna go on the other side of the parking lot, and now we need to be in pairs to make sure that they're being safe and that we can report that their safety is first. It has complicated a lot, the landscape.
So where were you threatened with guns and
North Carolina.
in North Carolina? Do you know of any such activity in Pennsylvania when your folks have been out?
I don't have a knowledge in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, you're a good state.
Yeah. And I would just keep adding and echo Luis's sentiment on the mis and disinformation. Something that we are seeing is that Spanish voters are being targeted. Specifically, we've seen some videos coming out on YouTube where they talk about the penalty of voting if you're not eligible to vote. I will tell this crowd and everyone that asks, I have yet to meet a voter who's not eligible who would like to commit a felony for an I voted sticker. I have not met that person yet. Are there any other questions? All right, I'm gonna provide brief remarks and then I'm gonna turn it over to you, Frankie. And I want to thank everyone here for attending. Thank you so much, Luis and Matt, for all the work that you do. Erica, and to the entire team at Taller Puertorriqueño, muchísimas gracias for hosting us. As you can see, we are really dedicated to making sure that the Latino community turns out to vote. In fact, Hispanic Fed and Latino Victory Foundation are partnering in making sure that people understand the deadlines that are coming up when it comes to voter registration and also voting early. Today, in fact, is Virginia and Maryland and a couple others. So know that we will continue to do that work, nonpartisan, to make sure that our community has the information that they need. I will also say that Latino and Latina voters are the largest non-white voting bloc and the second largest voting bloc in the country. So what this means is that we need a robust Latino voter turnout program in states like Nevada, Arizona, Pennsylvania, and across the US, because as Luis pointed out, in some of these states, we are the margin of victory. When you think about 2020 in Georgia, when you think about Arizona, where we won, when those states were won by over a little bit of 10,000 votes, who made that impact and difference was the Latino community. And so why we are here today is because it's important that we have data that is nuanced, data that really goes into the trenches of who we are as a community, whether it's language, but also country of origin. So many of us impact these elections and have really that, I would say, that communication that we use in our own communities and with our own families, and we know that we ourselves are the biggest messengers in our communities. If a stranger knocks on your door, the likeliness that you will listen to that stranger is less likely than if your nephew or your sister or your tia or your comadre actually tells you the importance of voting. But I want to make sure that we are clear in terms of touting historic turnouts, and that it's important that as we head into Election Day, 3 weeks away, that the resources that are needed in this last push to really fill that gap are invested in getting Latinos out to vote and flushing them out of their homes to turn out to vote, and to also pay attention to what we may be seeing on Election Day when it comes to voter disenfranchisement and turning Latino voters away. There is a formidable opportunity to make sure that Latinos turn out to vote, and that we keep really making sure that there's this enthusiasm, not only in this election, but beyond. And so with that, I want to say thank you to all of you and turn it over to Frankie, who's going to dive in a little bit more in terms of, you're going to wrap it up? Okay.
Yeah, just wrap it up. At the end of the day, for us, this is about recognizing the incredible organizations here in Pennsylvania. I want the Taller Puertorriqueño, Asociación Puertorriqueña en Marcha, National Puerto Rican Agenda, Make the Road, Casa San Jose, Ceiba, Casa, everybody, Hispanic Center of Lehigh Valley, and asked it to come here to the front. So if anybody is interested in talking to these amazing organizations, they are here, they're doing the work. And at the end of the day, it's about cultural competence. If you're asking the questions and you know that you're going to order from the menu beans, you know that in certain places it's going to be habichuela, in other places it's going to be frijol, in other places it's going to be feijão, you need to ask the right question in the right cultural and linguistically competent way. Thank you so much for coming, and please, the organizations, join us here on the front.